Hi, Shirley.
Hi, how are you?
Part two.
That's right. All's good.
Right.
Guess I need two screens. Okay, I'm going to exit and go back to the other one.
Okay.
All right, see you in a minute.
It's starting now.
Hey, Cherry, this is Bill.
Hi, Bill.
Okay, I think Pierre's on. I think it should be just in a couple within the minute then.
Okay.
All right, I'll mute myself.
Hello. It's
Hi. Nicole. Leon will be joining us shortly. He's having issues with accessing the link.
Does he need, is he next door?
Yeah.
Help or IT over there?
Nicole just resent it. Can you check? Well, no. Do make sure. Hold on.
We're all here. Very good. We know this. All right. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All right. And everyone is here. Okay. Good. Thank you. I'll call the Special City Council orientation meeting for December 8th, 2020 to order. Can you share a flag for Pledge of Allegiance, please? Very good, thank you. Please follow me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic
for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Okay. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Miriam Abadamos.
here.
Councilmember Mark Joseph.
I'm here.
Councilmember Pierre Washington.
Here.
Vice Mayor David Orrell.
Here.
Mayor Leon Garcia.
Here. Thank you all. An announcement relevant to teleconference participants. City Clerk.
Sorry, Mayor, there are no public comments, so there is no language to read for public comment.
Okay. It's part of our usual formatting, I think, right? Okay, moving on, City Clerk announcement pursuant to Government Code 54952.3. It is as stated in the agenda. Moving on to business, A1, receive a presentation from city staff and the city attorney on job functions and legal matters. Mr. Hawley, Mr. Ross.
Yes, Mayor. Thank you, and thanks to everybody for getting together this evening. The main point of the item tonight is to help begin to build this team that we have, given that we now have one new council member, and we also have new city staff who've come on board. And so what we're trying to do in this period of change is to make sure we're all rowing in the same direction and we all understand how the city operates, roles and responsibilities, et cetera. So we kind of coined this evening to be an orientation of sorts. We've added some new material. I think everybody will find something that they've learned tonight. And the main point was to make sure we're all on the same page as we move forward into next week's council meeting. And then we have a bit of a break, and then we have definitely a full agenda in January. So lots of activity still here in the city, notwithstanding the COVID pandemic, still a lot of activity and a lot of opportunities for the council to meet and lots of important decisions to make in the future. So we wanted to make sure that we're all on the same page. And what we've decided to do in preparing this presentation is to piggyback off of a format that I think all of you might be familiar with from our Citizens Academy. Essentially, what we've taken is the first night of our Citizens Academy, and we've distilled roughly half of that into a presentation for you tonight. But we are going to expand upon some ideas around the city clerk's office. We're also going to expand upon a topic that the council will hear next week at your meeting related to committee appointments and council assignments and that sort of thing. So we're going to spend some time there. But at the moment, we're just going to do a little bit of a recap. And like I said, I think some of this may be a little bit of review, but it's always healthy to take a look back and make sure we're all on the same page. So Cherry, if you wouldn't mind sharing the presentation, we will go ahead and get started. So thank you, Cherry. I'm actually going to minimize my screen here. So we've coined this to be a bit of an orientation, and we're going to be doing a second orientation in January where we have more specific information from our operating departments. Tonight is just going to focus on the city as a whole, its relationship with its peer cities and jurisdictions and overlapping jurisdictions with other agencies. It's going to focus on the roles and responsibilities of the council and the manager. The city attorney will provide information about the role that the city attorney plays, as will, I mentioned before, the city clerk. And also we will have the fire district chief, Chief Cahill, will also be providing information about the fire district. From there, we will launch into a discussion about committee assignments and then wrap it up with some closing comments. We wanted to keep this to be a little bit less formal, although we do want to get to the presentation. If there is anything in any of the slides or any comments or any questions, please don't wait to the end to ask them. Just go ahead and either signal or raise your hand, and we'll try and get those addressed at the time. We've allotted 2 hours for this presentation, or for this entire topic. I don't necessarily think it'll take that entire time, but we wanted the opportunity to have a dialogue with the council. And so that's why we've allotted that time. So thank you, Cherry. You could go to the next slide. And we will begin our presentation. Actually, you can go one more, please. So this slide is showing community demographics, and keep in mind this is 2018 data. As we pulled this together, we haven't updated this information for 2020, although it hasn't changed much. For example, our population, Department of Finance estimated our population in 2020 to be 20,873. So very similar to what it was in 2018, slightly less. The breakdown of our ethnicity and our other demographics is largely the same, and it's something that the council is intimately familiar with. The ethnicity breakdown of American Canyon residents is by far the most diverse in Napa County, and really representative of the Bay Area in total, which is a very diverse location. Approximately a third of our residents are Asian, roughly 26% are Hispanic, roughly 24% Caucasian, African American, roughly 7.5% to 8%, and others are also around 8%. And that gives American Canyon its flavor, its uniqueness. It gives American Canyon its community and its standing and how it exists in the Bay Area and in comparison to its neighbors, and something that we celebrate.
Mr. Hawley, how do we get the 2018 number? Obviously, it's not that census number, U.S. Census number for population.
If I recall specifically, we had done economic development plan. The plan is still a draft. We haven't finalized it, but we had done a lot of background work in 2018. And so a lot of this data came from that economic development study.
Okay. All right.
And you'll see on the next slide some additional information from that study. As I mentioned before, American Canyon is somewhat unique in comparison to Napa County as a whole. Our average household size, 3.5 compared to the average in Napa County of only 2.69. Our household income being higher, and that may come as a surprise to some people, but it's reflective from a number of factors, including a higher percentage of dual income working families, as well as our proximity to high-paying jobs in the Bay Area makes American Canyon a popular place for residents to live, and being so centrally located. Many of our residents in our households have two working parents who work in various directions in well-paying jobs elsewhere in the Bay Area. Per capita income being less than the county average is not surprising, given the high number of children under the age of 18 that are present in our households. They're typically not earning, they're going to school, and so their per capita income is zero, obviously. So as you can see on the upper hand right of the screen, our percentage of residents over the age of 18 is much less, or said differently, we have a higher percentage of children in our homes than the countywide average, and our median age is 6 years younger. Move on to the next slide, if you wouldn't mind, please, Cherry. Thank you. This also came from that economic development study in 2018, and it talked about the jobs in American Canyon. We talked about our top employers, Walmart, the school district, and then Coca-Cola and Mazzetta out in the Green Island area, being food and beverage manufacturing, DoubleTree being a lodging employer, and Gelati being a general construction company. This list hasn't been updated to include IKEA, which has opened up an e-commerce distribution facility. I don't know exactly how many employees there, but I'm fairly certain it's more than 100. So they would certainly be on this list. And so it's a variety of employers in American Canyon, and I think a little bit of a different variety than you might see elsewhere in Napa County. The slide on the right-hand side of the page talks about where American Canyon residents work, and not surprisingly, many of them work elsewhere. Only roughly 13% of them work in American Canyon, and the rest travel somewhere else to work, as far away as the greater Bay Area to the south, and San Francisco and Oakland, Fairfield, and Solano County being other popular locations, Vallejo being a popular location. And some commute into either Napa County broadly or the city of Napa more properly. And vice versa, the workers who are in American Canyon, where are they living, if not American Canyon? As you can see, about 26% of the workers in American Canyon are living here. The rest living in other places, city of Napa, for example, or Solano County, Benicia, Vallejo, Fairfield, and Vacaville, all being predominantly those locations in Solano County where people who work in American Canyon might commute from, I should say.
Always been a lot of interest in getting higher paying jobs in American Canyon. So with the list of employers, the top employers, do we have any sense of what the wages are, salaries in those areas are? I think that would be an interesting part of the demographic as well.
Sure. I don't have a sense. I don't have the study in front of me. We did do a little bit of work on the flip side of about, at least in 2018, what the hourly wage you would need to make in a household, a combined household hourly wage to be able to afford
that'd be a good one, yeah. Yeah.
And that number was around $50 an hour, and that could be from two adults combined at $50 an hour, or one adult at $50 an hour. But that was generally what the range was. I don't have a sense of kind of the average wages for these employers.
Then the numbers under my mic's not working. Can you hear me?
Oh, we can hear you.
You can hear it's working.
The numbers under the cities where it says where American Canyon workers live, are those average or are those median housing costs?
The dollar signs, those are that's median home prices. That's median home prices. And again, that's 2018 data. And the next slide we have is going to dive into that a little bit. And I know you're interested in that in particularly.
That's very, my experience right now is that that's very inaccurate.
Sure. If we might flip to the next slide, and Cherry, we can dive into that a little bit. And this the bottom part of that slide, again, this is 2.5 years old now. American Canyon, what the slide is meant to demonstrate is that American Canyon still has some relatively affordable housing, at least compared to Napa and San Francisco, but more expensive than Fairfield or Vallejo. I think, as you pointed out, Councilmember Rabadamas, certainly that number is 20% low or something like that, 30% lower now. But and I don't have we regularly track data with consultants. I just don't have the property median home price property information at my fingertips. But the point of the slide was to kind of show where we are relative to our neighbors. The other community demographics, with American Canyon, a high degree of educational attainment, with college, associates, and bachelor's degrees, many of our residents having advanced education. So we didn't compare this educational attainment to necessarily our neighbors, but as we described the community that we all serve, it's with a significant amount of educational attainment, and I think it's important to keep in mind. You can flip to the next slide, Cherry, please. Moving on from the demographics to just do a little bit of history. Many of you probably know all this, and some of you may have even been involved, Bill, maybe in some of these earlier slides at the top there, but so I'm only halfway joking. So
1884.
1884. Or in the early 1900s, some settlements here, both pioneers and early immigrants settling the area around where we are now. The first subdivision, McKnight Acres, coming in on the heels of the end of World War II, and a few years later, Rio Del Mar or Rancho Del Mar subdivision being built. At that time, the Standard Pacific Cement Factory, which is now the Watson Ranch Plant, the Ruins and Gardens, was operating as a cement plant. The landfill was opened in the 40s and closed down shortly, either right at or right before incorporation. And a series of notable milestones. The first elementary school in 1961. The fire district was formed in the mid-50s. Largely in response to the first couple of subdivisions being built and the desire to have those services Later on, the American Canyon County Water District was formed in the late 60s. And that's the kind of the top of the page, and probably among the most significant milestones here would be 1992. The city population 7,706, and that would be when the city incorporated, again, January 1st, 1992. Moving to the second half of that slide. Oh, sorry, Cherry, if we could pop back real quick. I'm going to go to the bottom half of the slide there. City now does its first general plan. The middle school opens. We start to see some commercial development with Safeway, the pool being built, and the new open space. Kenny Oaks Elementary School and Walmart. The new City Hall where we are today in the late 2000s. American Canyon High School opening in 2010. And still, although now 10 years old, among the most beautiful high schools probably in all of California.
Yeah.
I think the other aspects of particularly community involvement, our Boys and Girls Club being re-envisioned and revitalized in a proper facility in late 2017, and Mike's Bike and Hike Trail around the former landfill, also back in the early 2012 timeframe. All these were significant milestones, and we continue to add significant milestones to our timeline. Thank you, Cherry. So yes, this is the planning area from our original general plan, 1994, shortly after incorporation. And American Canyon at the time of incorporation, its municipal limits, was a lot smaller than it is today. This map shows a half a dozen annexations that have occurred since incorporation. And on this map, the outer boundary, one that has a long dash and two small dashes, was this very broad, what's termed in this general plan as our planning area. And what that boundary represents actually is the water service area of the former American Canyon County Water District. And so the reason back in 1994 that we had such a large planning area was because we were authorized to provide water service to this much larger boundary, and our general plan required us to study the provision of those services to that outer area, notwithstanding the fact that those areas were well outside of our incorporation limits, which is shown as the dark shaded area on this map. So you can see this dark core shaded area. That's the city's original municipal limits. Vintage Ranch did not exist. La Vin did not exist. The Green Island industrial area existed in part, but that was in the unincorporated county at the time. And so, and Watson Ranch was not part of the city. And so over time, various areas, first Lavinia, then Vintage Ranch, and then Watson Ranch were annexed on the east side. The Green Island area was also annexed to the city in a couple of subsequent annexations on the west side. And you can see with this color-coded map how the city has grown over time. The shaded area also represents proposed urban limit lines, and the city has modified its sphere of influence and its urban limit line over time as well. You might change Cherry to our next slide, please. This slide is our most current general plan map from late 2018, and it shows our current incorporated limits as well as those areas inside our sphere. They either have zoning or pre-zoning, and the color-coded areas of the map are different general plan designations, which generally correlates to land use. So, for example, the areas on the left-hand side of the screen that are generally kind of a yellowish color indicate a residential land use type. The areas in red down the middle indicate a land use type associated with our Broadway District specific plan, which is a mix of commercial and residential. The area that's light green at the very northwest or the upper left-hand side is an industrial designation that describes, like the name suggests, industry and manufacturing, et cetera. And then on the right-hand side of the page, you see a series of purple and blue designations. And the purple and blue designations are areas that were annexed to the city and through prescriptive specific planning processes were added. They all represent also residential, just like the yellow, but they were through a very specific planning process to get those purple designations. And then kind of in the center of the screen in kind of an oval shape with a light blue is the Watson Ranch specific plan. And this is a combination of residential and tourism and commercial-based uses in and around that former cement factory, what we now call the Napa Valley Ruins and Gardens. We'll move on, Cherry. So we're gonna switch gears a little bit to talk about local government. American Canyon is a general law city. There are two kinds of cities. One type is called a charter city, and the other is a general law city. And when American Canyon incorporated, the citizens at the time incorporated the city as a general law city. And the way that we are organized, our legal powers and responsibilities are much more prescribed by state law as a general city. Charter cities actually have the ability to adopt their own city charter and are allowed to have more unique or flexible arrangements or legal powers or organizations based on their charter. The charter kind of acts like a mini constitution for them. But American Canyon is a general law city. Overall in California, there's approximately 6,500 units of government, 58 counties and 482 cities, of which we are one, but there's also about 1,000 school districts and about 5,000 special districts, of which the American Canyon Fire Protection District is one of those. Napa County has 5 incorporated cities. American Canyon is the largest, or second largest. Napa is the largest. St. Helena, Yountville, and Calistoga round out Napa County. And areas that are not within the municipal limits of those 5 cities are served only by the county without city services, again, with the exception of those areas. For example, that American Canyon provides water service to. We'll move on, Cherry. So this is one of my most favorite slides because it always makes me laugh. This slide means to begin a discussion about layers of government in American Canyon. We just got done talking about all the different units of government in California. And so in American Canyon, it's really simple. We have the city of American Canyon, local government, and we have the American Canyon residents and businesses, and there's a direct line. We provide services, and it's very simple. But if we'll move on to the next slide, this is actually my favorite slide because it actually talks about the complexity of what we do. We don't do it all, and we don't do it all alone here at the city. We have many partners, many layers of government that provide services to our residents, and we provide services to others as well. And there's quite a bit of overlay and overlap. I'll take a moment to kind of go through each of these bubbles. We'll start at the bottom right with the American Canyon Fire Protection District, which is a subsidiary special district. It is legally a separate entity from the city of American Canyon, but at the same time, there's quite a bit of overlap in what services we provide for the district, as well as what the district provides to residents of the city of American Canyon. Schools are provided for the most part by the Napa Valley Unified School District, at least public schools are. We do have one private school here in American Canyon. And then secondary education is countywide is provided at the Napa Valley College. I mentioned before our partnerships, local government partnerships, and there are a number of them. One of my favorites is the partnership we have with the City of Napa Housing Authority, and we contract with them for housing services. And it's my favorite because they're forever providing such amazing service and providing housing programs and opportunities for our residents. And if we didn't have this partnership, we would be stuck trying to provide this service for ourselves, and it would cost a lot more than what our service arrangement is with the City of Napa, and they do a fantastic job. And we have other local government partnerships too, particularly around emergency dispatch. I don't see on here the Napa County Sheriff. So, oh yeah, that's down there at the county slide. We have a number of partnerships with the county of Napa, and I'll touch on those in a second. besides the local government partnerships, the city also participates in a number of JPAs, and there are a couple of kind of JPAs. There's joint powers agreements, which are two entities agreeing to do things, and then there are actually joint powers authorities, where it's an actual agency. And so in the case of Napa Valley Transportation and the Bay Area Quality Management District, the Bay Area Association of Governments, Metropolitan Transportation Commission, Regional Water Quality Control Board, all these JPAs are entities. Actually, RWQCB is in the wrong place. RWQCB is a state and regulatory agency, but those others are regional associations where the partner agencies have agreed to partner together to share costs, provide services jointly across a spectrum of different service areas. Moving over to the left side of that, we talked about state and federal, numerous regulatory agencies. RWQCB is the State Water Resources Control Board, the Regional Water Resources Control Board. They regulate water quality and water resources. There are others such as the Air Quality Management District that regulate air quality. There are a number of mostly state, some and also federal agencies that regulate the city as an entity. We also have service providers such as the post office or the Department of Transportation. Caltrans is one of the more prominent state agencies in American Canyon because our main street, our primary thoroughfare is a state highway, State Highway 29. And so everything that happens on State Highway is controlled by Caltrans, and the city does not have much control on what happens on the highway. I'll touch lastly on the county of Napa and the services that we contract with them for some, and services they provide in general as a county entity. All of the health and human services they provide, and they have leased from us downstairs office space and provide through our city hall. They provide a number of social services. We also contract with the county for the provision of library services at our library. Animal control and sheriff police services are provided by contract with Napa County, and our sheriff's contract for police services has been in place, it's my understanding, has been in place since incorporation. And if you had to point to, all of the decisions that have been made over the last nearly 28 years, nearly 29 years, and some of the early decisions that were made, contracting with Napa Sheriff for police services was one of the smartest decisions, because where you see other jurisdictions these days who have their own police departments and are struggling with employee costs and pension costs and various things as it relates to public safety, American Canyon has been able to shift or mitigate some of those costs. Instead of having our own police force by contracting with the sheriff, we've been able to do that. But that itself is not terribly unique. There are many cities who contract with the sheriff for police services, but our unique spin on it has been to provide vehicles, to provide uniforms, and to create an ambiance really of having a local police department. And even the deputies for Napa County Sheriff who come and have an assignment here in American Canyon really view themselves as part of the American Canyon Police Department. It isn't just another assignment for a county employee. They really view themselves as part of the city of American Canyon and the American Canyon Police Department. And so the public gets the look and the feel and the responsiveness of a really great police agency, but we don't necessarily have to have all the costs or all of the risks of having our standalone police department, and that has greatly benefited American Canyon over its history. The jails and the courts are services that are provided by the county as part of its structure as one of the 58 counties. Are there any questions on this slide? I kind of went through a lot of those real fast, but I wonder if there are any questions.
Jason, I've been here a few years, and for all of these agencies, the ones that we, particularly on the county side, it's just the sheriffs that we're paying for, correct? Or I don't recall us budgeting for anything else, so like social services or others.
Animal control is a separate contract that we budget for. And but the others, you're right. Library and social services pro the county, we have an arrangement where we provide the building for the library, and it's a sort of a mutual beneficial relationship. But you're right. We don't have to budget a line item for the library other than upkeep of the building, for example.
What about the housing program with the city of Napa?
We budget for that each year, and that's a pay-for service.
Thank you.
Any other questions, or if not, I'll have Sherry move on to the next slide, please. So besides just being a general law city, the city has arranged itself as a form of government, and the council manager form of government, which is the most common in California for cities of our size. And it involves a mayor and council being elected by voters. And then the five of you, the mayor and council, hire a professional manager such as myself to handle the day-to-day operations of the city. There are other forms of government. I'm not going to get into all the other forms of government here, but this is the most common in California. On to the next slide, please, Jerry. Thank you. Just real briefly, how the council manager form of government works is a lot of different depictions over time, but in general, we're all here to serve the public, and we have different roles. The public provides input, and they both elect and provide input to elected officials. Elected officials, act as that communication bridge or that conduit to both myself, the chief executive, and to staff to make us aware of issues, concerns, and opportunities that are out there. The chief executive, myself, provides direction to staff and the implementation of the policy goals and policy direction from the council, and we on staff, again, providing service back to the public. So it is a bit of a circular sort of process. We'll move on. Cherry, please. Thank you. Mayor and city council roles and responsibilities. Again, state law and local ordinances and regulations, define this more specifically. But the city's elected officials do the following: legislative authority, meaning adopting ordinances, establishing policies, visions, goals, strategies, policies. Those are all the purview of the council. And then prioritizing those, which is probably the harder discussion, because there are a lot of good ideas out there, but prioritizing which ones we're going to be moving forward with is the role of the council. Adopting and monitoring the city budget. Again, the resources that are available after those priorities have been determined to implement those policies. And then there is a ceremonial aspect, constituent and ceremonial representation, going to events, being a part of groups. And again, it's part of that active listening in the community. And then another responsibility is participating in regional organizations, both the JPAs we kind of mentioned, and there are a number of regional groups that the council goes and represents the city in a bigger perspective.
Jason,
Yeah.
where would the oversight role of council come into play on this list?
Oversight, certainly, establishing policy and oversight of its implementation. I think there's it's both establishing and then oversight that's seeing it's being implemented. I think that's a good point, Mark. We can certainly add some of that content there. Also, in the monitoring of the city budget, as funds are expended, as programs are implemented, again, the oversight comes in that aspect too. We'll move on, Cherry, please. And we'll move on here to the current city council. All of you know yourselves. Those pictures are not surprises, but we did find a picture there. Councilmember Washington. We will be moving forward to get some new photos for the council here in the future, but for the moment we'll have to live with that one. Getting back to the kind of the policy piece, It's the council previously had adopted a mission statement, community vision, organizational values, and this is really our guiding principles for the kinds of programs and policies that get implemented and how things are prioritized. I'm not going to go through all of those because I know you're well versed in that. Next slide, Sherry. These are some of the more detailed strategies that feed those goals. We went through a very extensive visioning and goal setting process back in 2014, and over the years have revisited those. Each year as a part of our budget process, we incorporate these goals and strategies into that budget process, and that provides the framework for direction to me, what things are we to be implementing. As staff is working on different projects or programs, we're frequently checking in with these goals and priorities, and you often see in staff reports, explanation as to how what is being proposed for council consideration, how it aligns with these goals and strategies. Move forward, Sherry, please. Thank you. City organizational chart, generally structured, again, with the residents electing and providing feedback to the council, who's hiring the city manager. I'll note on the right-hand side of the page, and in a few moments we'll talk about the role of the city attorney, but the council also directly hires the city attorney, and the city attorney reports directly to the city council. The city council also appoints 3 different commissions, the Planning Commission, the Parks and Community Services Commission, and the Open Space and Advisory Committee. And those are commissions and committee of residents who have a particular interest in topics and a particular set of qualifications, and they serve at the discretion of the council. And in particular, the Planning Commission has authority to approve certain kinds of projects without them ever being approved by the council. And so that's always one of the interesting ways that cities organize themselves. Planning commissions are required by state law, but in some places the planning commissions approve relatively little, and other places they approve quite a number of things, and it does vary, and that's something the council has discretion on. In our case, has prescribed what things they're willing to let the planning commission approval and what things they want the council to consider for themselves. Within the city manager office, we have our assistant city manager, our city clerk, our outreach, and generally our executive management, human resources, legislation, and quality of life initiatives, a lot of those catch-all administrative functions. We also have separate departments. These are all with department heads leading these departments. Our community development department, really responsible for the short-term and long-term planning, also building inspections and code enforcement, housing and economic development activities. Our utilities and maintenance department, responsible for environmental compliance, park maintenance, recycled water, utilities, fleet, and building maintenance. On the public works side, capital improvement program, development engineering, stormwater compliance, storm drain, and transportation programs. And they also function as the city engineer. On the police side, I mentioned before the American Canyon Police Department, which is mostly a contract with the Napa Sheriff. We do have 2 city employees who serve in a non-sworn function who are members of the police department, and they generally work on being sort of in the front lines, parking, and sort of general resource officers. But animal control also fits under here. Investigations, our school resource officers that we contract with Napa Sheriff also fit in this group. One of the best aspects of our police contract with the Napa Sheriff is that we have access to all of the resources of the Napa Sheriff's office almost at the drop of a hat. While certainly other police departments rely on mutual aid from other departments, and that can be relied upon, our contract with the sheriff is actually more explicit. So if at any time we needed the resources of a helicopter or a drone or additional police presence, we have the ability to call upon those resources from the Napa Sheriff, who happen to be located very nearby at the Sheriff's Office on Airport Road. So just outside of city limits. In fact, they're within our water service boundary. And those resources are available. And so we don't have to stock up on them on our own. The city doesn't have a helicopter, the city doesn't have a drone, those sorts of things. We're allowed to utilize those resources, which don't come up very frequently, but when you do need them, you really wish you had them. And being able to tap into the Napa County Sheriff resources is a huge benefit for us. We also have a city finance department, which is responsible for a lot of the functions you might imagine. All of our accounts, our AR, AP, our budgeting, our revenue collection, and our utility billing for our utility systems. And we have our park and recreation department, which is responsible for our recreation programming, our special events, our pool, our senior center, and our recreation, I already mentioned that, our recreation programming.
And fire is also not on here.
Correct. And the reason the fire department's not on here is because they've got their own slide.
They're a separate fire district.
They're a separate district, and Mike has his own slide that we'll be getting to in a couple of moments. But that is deliberate, Councilmember Abadamos, because the fire district isn't part of the city. Although we provide services back and forth, separate entities, we wanted to make sure we showed it that way.
Mr. Hawley, on the Parks and Community Services Commission, the community services part, I know we do a lot of things there, and it is looking at, I don't know, matters pertaining to like park development, park and recreation facility uses, recreation program, and I think related issues. But what is the community services part of that title?
I would say it's probably a combination of the recreation programming and also the community events. That the community services really, whether we provide the recreation program ourselves or we partner with third-party nonprofits to provide that recreation programming, it's really that part of the community service as well as our community events. So it's the city has a number of events it puts on, as well as it also coordinates the events put on by other groups. And so that's something we've tried to increase our coordination of those groups. So that
example today, the food distributed here in American Canyon, and our staff help assist with that in terms of, because it's over here at the Aquatic Center parking lot. That's just the one example.
Correct. During the pandemic, as we've been in this emergency mode now, that community services function has taken on a different life and has involved assisting with food distribution and other events that are providing a different kind of community service on a more in an emergency response manner.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Sherry, we'll move on to the next slide, and really already kind of talked about the city manager office, but it's really the top line that kind of describes the overarching role of the city manager's office, carrying out the policies established by the council, make recommendations to the council, meeting with citizens and local businesses. We attend all the council meetings, and develop fiscal plans for the city, and making sure that the resources are used in a prudent way, and coordinating between the departments and outside entities where services are being provided. Move on to the city attorney. So I'm going to have Bill have an opportunity to talk about the role that the city attorney plays in support of the council.
Okay, so in my presentation, if there are any questions while I'm going through it, please interrupt me and I'll attempt to answer them. I think the important thing to remember about the first bullet point is that I do represent the city council, city officers, and individual council members. My client legally is the city council. Doesn't mean I don't advise city officers or city officials. I do. doesn't mean that I don't advise individual council members. I do. I think the critical thing to remember there from my perspective would be that as individual members of the council, unless authorized specifically by some action of the city, you're not authorized to represent the city. You can't say, this is what the city will do, or this is what the city won't do. The second bullet point is a very broad summary of what I do. The function of advice and representation includes the actions that may be accomplished by you as a council. Jason referenced earlier that under certain provisions of state law, planning law, the Planning Commission itself can have final action, which may be appealed to you, but in some cases it can be final there. So there are actions accomplished by the Planning Commission that are legally complete. This is also true with respect to certain decisions of the city manager and to a certain extent of the planning director with respect to land use authorizations. I think the third bullet point I'm going to enlarge on and try and relate it to some matters that would come before you, some this next Tuesday, some in January. So when it says I ensure compliance with the Brown Act, certainly a great deal about the Brown Act is implemented by the city clerk's office. But think about the principles of the Brown Act, and it actually goes back to the early 50s. The idea is to ensure that actions of local government are taken in an open meeting. As it evolved through the legislature, the exceptions for closed session and then specific provisions in closed session were provided for. There's a procedural function that I perform with respect to the Brown Act in your meetings. For example, there's regular and special meetings. For regular, we have to give 72 hours notice and special 24 hours notice. But if something comes up that you need to take action on, you can add it to the agenda. That's one procedural aspect, and that's accomplished by a specific action of your council, 4/5 vote to put it on the agenda, for example. I think another aspect of the procedural portions of the Brown Act actually interplays with the topic of ethics requirements. That's an enlargement of the AB 1234 requirements that you went through. I've reviewed what the league provides on that, and a lot of that relates to the actions you would take in a public hearing, which gets involved with the next bullet point about how do you do what you do. You do things that are quasi-legislative, where you're setting policy, you're adopting standards. The best examples would be general plan designations is a quasi-legislative action. Zoning is a quasi-legislative action. Notice I said policy. It legally does not involve the use of evidence. Weighing what people say about the use of land, weighing what people or individuals, members of the public or an advocate for a development says with respect to how services will be met, how construction will be accomplished, how open space will be preserved, how critical areas of habitat, such as those associated with water quality provisions, have to be preserved. All those are quasi-adjudicatory or requiring an evidentiary finding by you. With respect to those are public hearings. There are requirements concerning notice for public hearings. I ensure that that takes place. Something that's coming up, then it's associated with an adjudicatory action, is whether or not you've received an ex parte communication. Ex parte is the Latin term meaning one part or one person. It means a direct communication to you as a council member about a land use project or an action associated with a land use project that may be formulated in an agreement. What do I mean? You've got an example coming up on Tuesday. One are the vesting tentative maps that are associated with the first part of the development of the Watson Ranch specific plan. You as a council member can choose whether or not you even want to have ex parte communications. It's not necessary that you talk to advocates for, members of the public, or even opposition individuals or organizations concerning a land use matter. You can politely defer and say, I will evaluate the matter based on the evidence at the hearing. I understand there are differing views on the matter, for example. On legislative matters, there's not an ex parte standard. In other words, you don't have to disclose. Part of the Brown Act's obligation for disclosure of ex parte communications goes to the concept back in the beginning. You must accomplish city actions at an open meeting. If you're getting evidence on a quasi-adjudicatory matter in a one-on-one conversation, that's evidence. It's outside the public hearing, so the obligation is to disclose it, what was said to you. It also importantly covers candidates for city council positions from the effective day of their filing. So, for example, there's one member of your council tonight that if conversations took place concerning, for example, subdivision maps to be approved for the Watson Ranch specific plan, those conversations would need to be disclosed. What does the form of that disclosure take? And I'm going a little bit deeper on this than normally. It is to summarize what was given to you in terms of a representation of fact. If you didn't learn anything new from what's in the staff reports or your review of any documents on that matter, then you didn't learn anything new. It's important that that issue is understood. If there are questions on that, I think we all recognize there are several factual situations in which that could come up. Going on, that's different though if it's a general plan amendment. That's a legislative action. Associated with both these though is a refined area of environmental review. That's the California Environmental Quality Act. That's CEQA. CEQA is something that's based on evidence. So if there's a communication, for example, on a zoning amendment that involves its environmental review, which you consider separately, that may be reportable. What do you do? What do I review specifically? I review ordinances. An ordinance is a statement of law by you as a city. It requires majority action by the quorum of your council. The laws that interpret it are the same laws that govern statutes that are enacted by the state legislature, interpretation of the constitutional provisions of the state, and federal statutes as well. There are uniform rules that are applicable to whether your ordinance is in fact legal. Among the things I look at that are really exciting are whether it's internally consistent. Does it use the same term uniformly throughout? Resolutions are confirmation of your actions. It can be with respect to a quasi-legislative action, such as approving an agreement. It can be something that confirms an action on a conditional use permit or a subdivision map. All right, so it covers the gamut of both quasi-legislative and quasi-adjudicatory. Agreements take all kinds of forms. We've standardized many of the agreements that the city enters into for both services and for certain construction contracts. There are form agreements that protect the interest of the city. One form of agreement that involves quasi-legislative action and quasi-adjudicatory action is a development agreement. Why? A development agreement is a project under CEQA, so it has the evidentiary portion of it as to its environmental compliance. There's an issue on next Tuesday's agenda dealing with the development agreement for Napa Logistics. It involves the proposed assignment of part of the developer's right to develop one of those parcels. There are specific requirements in the development agreement about analyzing evidence by me, the city attorney. So it's a public hearing. I have to make certain findings about financial capability. In the past, we've had assignments, but because the evidence is so clear, a public hearing wasn't required. Bonds and financial security obligations. I'm involved in almost the form and substance of legal obligations of the city that take the form of bonds. Where do they come up? Security bonds in the performance of construction contracts, performance bonds, labor and material bonds. My favorite, and I say that maybe kind of sarcastically, is I like things called letters of credit because it's actual access to cash by the city if certain conditions are met. So that's the best type of financial security. It can also involve things like financing for the NG project, for example. Other legal documents as required. I'm going to give examples. Sometimes the legal documents of something as common as a building permit or a certificate of occupancy have specific issues with them so that their legal sufficiency has to be examined by me. Probably the most unique one is something that actually occurred, well, I think the analysis was about a year ago, is something called an ancient subdivision. What is that? Well, that was a division of land that was accomplished before any of the legislation enacted by the state on a subdivision more than 60 years ago. It actually was an issue with respect to access to Holy Family Church and the development that would take access from that subdivision in the proposed development for what was known as the Strawberry Patch. So there are unique issues there. The Public Records Act is a steadily evolving area of law. Why? Because it's so broad and it covers, with the exception of certain things that are exempt, those subject to like the attorney-client privilege, personnel records, what's known as the deliberative process of government. You know, we're entitled to communicate within city staff to figure out how to do things. It covers literally every kind of action that you take. I think there are things that you should be aware of, and I think you came in contact with them in the AB 1234 training, if you took it, concerning, well, what communications that I have as a council member may be subject to the Public Records Act. And depending upon the exemptions that I mentioned earlier, unless you have segregated government computers, phones, and associated with phones is going to be texting. There is the possibility that if you conduct city business on your private phone, your private computer, that they would be subject to being produced under the Public Records Act. So the next slide, if you could put that up, Cherry, it covers some things that when we reorganize this, everything will be on one page. I do have the authority to act like the district attorney for violation of city ordinances under specified circumstances. Remember that in the municipal code, some violations of the municipal code can be criminal and they can be prosecuted as misdemeanors. I recall that this is in the history of the city. I think it's been exercised twice. And Mark may recall the first one. I'm almost sure it was in 1994. And there was an individual that was illegally slaughtering cattle in his backyard. That violated several provisions of the municipal code. A more practical and mundane action was the action in 2012 against Napa Valley Casino for violation of the city ordinances concerning the placement and administration of card rooms and security. That led to a judicially supervised settlement that may be the subject of something you review next Tuesday. I represent the city, or I obtained special counsel for litigation involving the city council, city officials. Recent examples of this, the city uses almost exclusively the well-respected law firm of Liebert Cassidy for personnel matters. But peer review has been sought and obtained. Special counsel consultation, for example, like Michael Culentano on the LAFCO issues associated with, I'm going to call it the ongoing experience that the city has about the definition of the water service area of the city, is a good example. Another example would be, and it's unfortunately recurring, the use of bankruptcy counsel for specific issues associated, for example, with PG&E. So it does happen. What are the other legal actions that I perform as may be required? Ones where they come up infrequently, but it requires different counsel is, for example, an enforcement action on a zoning ordinance would be one example. Some of you may require the issue of bottoms up, the unique cafe facility, which involved more than the famous Lord Nelson phrase, bottoms up. I chose to represent the city enforcement side early in that proceeding, which originally would be Jim Cannon, then would be Jason as the city manager for a review of that enforcement action. But when it came to council, there had to be separate counsel for you as a city council to review the matter on appeal. I think, like all things associated with these bullet points, I'd say, very generally that when in doubt, consult. An ounce of preventative law is worth, pick a quantity, pounds, gallons of solving a problem that may be created. So that's a little bit more in-depth summary than I would normally give at the Academy. But I think it's broad ranging and it deals with issues that you're going to be faced with very quickly. Thank you. Any questions I'd attempt to answer?
Thank you, Bill. If we can move on, Sherry, jump back into the city clerk in the city clerk's office.
I think Cherry is muted.
Hey, Cherry, I think you're on mute.
Oh, gosh.
Or you're soft-spoken.
There we go.
Hi, I'm Cherry Walton, the interim city clerk. I have worked in the city clerk's office for 20 years. I would like to congratulate Council Member Abadamos and Mayor Garcia on your reelection and welcome newly elected Council Member Pierre Washington. And I look forward with working with you all. I will be presenting 3 slides covering the city clerk's areas of my responsibility. I will not go through each one in detail, but touch the categories briefly. As the city clerk, I serve as the elections officials, but in addition to this, there are ballot measures and occasional initiative referendums or recalls. While we consolidate with the county for elections administration, per the election code, the city clerk remains the election official for the city. The city clerk serves as the local legislation auditor and is responsible for public notices, contracts, and agreements, ordinances, and resolutions, and maintaining the city municipal code. Much of this occurs as council meetings follow up with the execution of documents, processing, and archival. The city clerk is the municipal officer providing services citywide, such as attestations, oath of office, custodial of city records, accept subpoenas, and provide notary services. As the city clerk, I serve as the political reform filing officer. This includes the Form 700s and the elected officials reporting forms, such as the campaign statements as listed on the slide. We currently use SouthTech systems to automate this process, but I know it's kind of tricky for most of you that are logging on to SouthTech, and we're going to work the tweaks out, but we're going to get there. The city clerk serves as the custodian of records and coordinates the response to public records requests. We follow the records retention schedule, ensure records are properly maintained, and oversee the entire process of the city records management program. The archive of council meeting minutes and other legislative bodies are the responsibility as well of the city clerk. So when public records requests come in, it is our responsibility as the city clerk to initiate the response to the requester, send the request over to staff, and do the initial follow-up. And in regards to any coordination of public records, same thing. City records, it can be your Form 700s, your FEPC campaign statements. It is our responsibility to maintain those documents and keep them or safeguard them in areas to where if the public asks to release them, they're on the city website, and we will continue to stay in contact with staff to make sure that those forms are updated and completed through SouthTech. The city clerk's office is often the face of the city, and first impressions are important. We are a source of information, and we work hard to make and retain community relationships. The city clerk office provides support services for appointed and elected officials. This includes ceremonial functions, commendation and award presentations, research, and being a resource for information and providing travel arrangements for you, conference registrations, and any other needs you have. If our office cannot assist you, we will always point you in the right department or to someone who can assist you. You will see later in this slide a presentation list of the city council committees. Next week on December 15th, you will be making the 2021 appointments to these committees. I will be sending you this past year's roster of council assignments in preparation for that discussion. You will have the opportunity on the 15th to express your interest in the various committees. While historically there have been few changes each year, there is nothing to say that says that you can't mix it up. Just a little bit on everyone's areas of interest. I am mentioning this today as it is the opportunity to begin thinking about it prior to next week's decision and appointments, discussion and appointments. I will also forward you a copy of the Rosenberg Rules of Order and references purposes. This concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
So what's your slides?
That's it. Sorry.
Hey, Cherry, if you click on your screen there, from the current slide, it'll click back to that part of the presentation.
Sorry.
That's okay.
Are you there?
Yeah, we're here.
Can you see my picture?
Yeah,
And then slide. Okay.
Slide doesn't come up.
Something's going on.
there you go. Almost. There.
Yeah, right there. Oh, not from the beginning, from the current.
Yeah, it's here.
You're sharing that.
There. No.
Share. Stop share.
Or
I apologize.
Yeah. So, yep, from current slide. Now, no, slow down.
I need to close these out. It's too many or something. It's not.
Okay.
Probably because of all the fire departments.
Which you can't see in the background. We had this presentation put together, and then we had a little bit of a mix up on what fire department slides we were going to add. And so we've
And take out. So this is the.
pulled those slides out of the presentation and
Probably
trying to do
told
all this on the fly for you.
So if you go.
You need to go to presentation.
it shows the excellent cooperation and coordination
Yeah,
between the city.
between our two agents.
So now you're here, okay? So now,
I can just go to where.
but then you gotta share your screen. Okay, so where's your?
Yep.
So,
Right there.
which one? This one.
how are we doing on time? It's almost 6:30 and we're supposed to be done at 7.
We have one. Here we go.
There we go.
It's over there.
Yeah, that's the one.
Yep.
This one.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, you got two of them, you know that, right? This one and this one.
Mm-hmm. One of them shouldn't have.
You're right.
There we go. Alrighty, Mike, take it away.
Here's that handsome guy. So I'll be quick here, folks.
What happened on my presentation? Sorry.
And again, apologize. I'm sure that part of the problem that Sherry's having was related to what we did. Just quickly to go over what the fire district's primary responsibilities are. We provide emergency response for fire and life safety, EMS, paramedic, advanced life support, first responder services, public education. We work closely with the community to do provide public education and services to both all aspects of the community, both from schools and also the elderly population that would live in mobile homes, trying to be specific in terms of the kinds of specific life safety issues that we try to move forward. We do fire prevention and code enforcement, inspections in both businesses and assembly occupancies, schools, in those areas. We do fire investigation. We just had a case that went to a jury trial this last week where our one of our fire captains was the primary investigator, and they were able to provide fire investigation materials and reports that allowed the district attorney to get a conviction on an arson case in American Canyon. And then finally, disaster preparedness. We work closely, and actually we're a member of the city's team to provide EOC operations and support your city staff in that area. And frankly, since I've been here in August and working with Jason and his staff with the COVID emergency, it's been it's literally hand in glove in terms of the district's association with the city operations. That's all I have this evening. We'll be providing much more in-depth information at the next meeting that we have with the council. Any questions? Great. Thank you. I appreciate your time tonight.
Thank you, Mike. We'll move on now. These are our last bit of slides. First, just wanted to cover real quickly the commissions and committees. These are groups that the council appoints city residents to. We mentioned before Parks and Community Services, Planning Commission, Open Space Advisory Committee, and we previously had a Water Rate Advisory Committee. There are also representatives on the Measure A Financial, sorry, I should say Measure T Financial Oversight Committee, the Mosquito Abatement District Board, the Napa City County Library Commission, and the Napa County Local Advisory Council. So these again are citizens that apply for these positions, and the council makes these appointments to them. Next slide, please, Cherry. The following 3 slides are a list of committee assignments that the city council has an opportunity to serve on. Some of them are local to American Canyon. Some of them are countywide. Some of them are agencies that are regional or countywide agencies that you would sit on the boards of. And I'm not going to identify necessarily all of them. In some cases, and we can maybe scroll to the next slide, Cherry. In some cases, for example, the Napa Valley Transportation Authority is prescriptive about who serves on that, what is an agency on that board. In this case, it's the mayor and then one other council member. Also on this list are what's known as a 2x2 committee, and you see one of those here with the Napa Valley Unified School District 2x2 committee, and there are others. 2x2 committees are somewhat informal arrangements, and these are examples where one entity, such as the city, another entity, such as the school district, may want to convene its policymakers to discuss overlapping issues between the 2 entities. And like Bill talked about with the Brown Act, if a majority of the council or a majority of the school board got together to talk about policy, that would require public notice per the Brown Act. And in this case, we deliberately don't want to have only a portion of those boards meeting and discussing particular issues. So the way that we do that is by appointing 2 members of the city council, and the school district appoints 2 members of its board. And that's where the name 2x2 comes from. And so 2 members of the council plus 2 members of the board will meet and talk about overlapping policy issues. Staff is usually there to support. And in this case, the committee is not authorized to represent a city position. The committee is not authorized to make decisions, et cetera. But in general, conversation about particular issues are discussed, and positions are explained, and information is shared. And then the 2 members of those committees come back to their full respective boards and have then an informed, properly noticed policy discussion. May we go back 1 slide, please? Thank you, Cherry. Also on this list is a couple of entities. One of the more unique assignments relates to the Napa County Local Agency Formation Commission, also known as LAFCO. LAFCO is not a comedy club, it's an actual entity. And it's a relatively obscure agency that most residents don't know much about. And every county has a LAFCO, and LAFCOs actually function as an agent of the state. And it's very prescriptive about how the representation on a LAFCO works. And it rotates from being a primary member or an alternative member here in Napa County. But it's a very important commission whose role is to help decide and orchestrate the provision of municipal services. Fortunately, our city attorney is a well-known expert statewide in LAFCO legislation. He actually sat on a commission in the early 2000s, and this was a statewide commission that helped rewrite LAFCO law. In general, LAFCO frowns upon urban sprawl, and it's meant to be planned, orderly growth as opposed to unconstrained sprawl. And what the legislature found in the 70s and 80s and 90s was very creative attempts at jurisdictions and urban sprawl. And so this was the legislature's attempt to have planned growth. It's not an agency that says there's no growth. It's meant to be orderly and planned. So in Napa County, it's unique also because of our county land use policies and the Ag Preserve. And so Napa County LAFCO takes on a unique role there. The Napa County League of Governments is something that all of you participate in. In many counties, their county of governments, their COG, is a more formal entity with officers, and some are actual agencies with staff. And in Napa County, it's a much less formal organization. And here, all of the elected officials from all the jurisdictions, including the county, get together on a periodic basis and discuss issues or receive information that are of importance to all of our jurisdictions. And so this isn't necessarily an appointment. All of you, by virtue of being on the council, participate in the Napa County League of Government meetings or have the opportunity to. Also,
Yes.
Oh yes, Pierre.
Can you go back just one slide back? Last week I was talking with Cherry. I was trying to get on to that tidbit.
T-bid, yes.
T-bid. What's the difference between that one and the Napa Valley tourism? They seem like they're the same.
Yeah, that's a great question, and they're kind of two sides of the same equation. On this slide is the American Canyon Local Government Committee, parentheses TBID, and if you go 2 slides forward, Cherry, the Napa Valley Tourism Corporation. These are both funded with TOT, this transient occupancy tax. The local, and we scroll forward again, or back 2 more slides, please, Cherry. The local governing committee, the TBID, is made up entirely of local representations in American Canyon and receives a small percentage of the TOT. And the local governing committee consists of the 3 hoteliers that we have, representatives from the 3 hoteliers in American Canyon, our Chamber of Commerce, the city manager, myself, and a representative of the city council, an appointee of the city council, and I'm probably forgetting somebody else, but it's
Chamber and a person at large.
Oh, and at large. Thank you. I knew I was forgetting those other ones. Thank you, Mark. And so that's the local governing committee, and currently Mark is the council appointee to that committee. The Napa Valley Tourism Corporation is the countywide equivalent of this committee, and there is representation from all of the jurisdictions and hotels across the county, and they hire Visit Napa Valley as an entity to administer different programs with the goal of increasing tourism, particularly hotel stays countywide. And it's kind of that countywide equivalent. So the local committee is kind of the American Canyon, the local committee, as the name suggests, and the Napa County Tourism Corporation is that regional countywide entity. But they're both focused on tourism. in increasing tourism and increasing hotel stays and the increasing of hotel tax in their respective areas.
Is Mark on both of those?
No, Councilmember Joseph is the appointee to the local governing committee, and Vice Mayor Oro is the council's appointee currently to the Napa Valley Tourism Board.
He was previously on both of those.
Correct, and I think you bring up a good point, and something that the Vice Mayor Oro and I have talked about, because the topics are so relatively similar. In the past, Mark had served on both. Currently, it's kind of divided between two council members. And there's a fair question as to whether or not it might make sense to have one person, one council member, be appointed to both, because the information flow from the local to the regional, and from the regional back to the local. If you have too many cooks in the kitchen, sometimes all the information isn't shared or isn't available, and can be a little cumbersome. So correct me if I'm wrong, Vice Mayor Oro, but there is some expectation at the Napa Valley Tourism Board that information is coming from the TBID, and you're sort of that ambassador of information back and forth.
Correct.
And so by not having the same person both, you're relying on a communication conduit, and not participating in both can not always can be not helpful sometimes.
Thank you.
Sure. The American Canyon Finance Committee is a subcommittee of the City Council. It is actually the mayor and the vice mayor, and so that rotates every year when the vice mayor is selected, and that's something also the council will be doing on next Tuesday. We'll be selecting a vice mayor for 2021, and so the makeup of that committee is prescribed to be the mayor and whoever the vice mayor ends up being. The League of California Cities North Bay Division, and then if you wouldn't mind, Cherry, going to the next slide, the League of California Cities Housing and Communication Economic Development Policy Committee. So the League of California Cities is the city is a member of that. It's a professional nonprofit association that represents all California cities, and the city participates as one of its members. And there are the North Bay Division is where American Canyon is assigned as it organized as the league, as we refer to it. The league organizes itself. American Canyon is in the quote North Bay Division. And so all of the council members participate in the League of California Cities by virtue of being a council member in the North Bay Division. There are opportunities for participation and leadership within the North Bay Division, as well as statewide offices for the League of California Cities. There are also different policy committees, and here the Housing, Communication, Economic Development Policy Committee is listed because Councilmember Abadamas has been appointed to serve on that committee. We listed here the African American Caucus because former Councilmember Ken Leary had actually been appointed to serve on that caucus. And like I said before, some of these slides are a little bit dated, so that one, at the moment, none of our council members have been appointed to that. But there are a whole variety of caucuses and policy committees that are available to all council members. And our representative, the league has representatives for each division. Our representative for the North Bay Division, his name is Nancy Hall Bennett, and she's been with the league a number of years and is a very familiar name that you all have all gotten to know, and Pierre will get to know and see. So
I encourage participation with all the league's activities. It's kind of like the professional education area for electeds. The league also has like a Latino caucus, Women's Caucus, Asian Pacific Islander Caucus, LGBTQ Caucus. It deals with the more policy committees like housing, communication. There's also, I serve on the governance, transparency, and labor relations. I know that doesn't sound terribly exciting, but it's actually large focus has been CalPERS, which is the retirement benefit program for all city and state employees. Being a recipient myself, I found that out after I got on it. That's what it dealt with. Try to maintain solvency there. So yeah, there's a lot of good seminar educational components that the league advertises. I've attended many of those in the past. And it's just, it's very helpful to have that. You can also network with other City officials, we have that as well. You know, if you got a problem locally, somebody else has probably dealt with it and solved it, and just connecting with other elected officials or other city staff out there, you can find out a wealth of information. It's a very valuable asset to have that ability to connect.
Yeah, there are nearly 2,500 city elected officials in California, and almost all of them are represented by the League of California Cities. So a lot of opportunity for networking with other peers. Also, the league itself puts on various seminars and various conferences. Normally, those conferences are in person, and there's an annual conference in the fall. Councilmember Washington and myself will be participating in a new councilmember mayor conference that the league is hosting this year next month. Again, because of COVID, this is all done virtually, but Pierre and I will be participating, and it's a series of seminars that I know some of you have been to this conference as well, that just present broad topics on city administration and operations and things like that. So lots of really a wealth of knowledge, like you suggest, Mayor.
Could you speak to council members attending some of these committees that are open to the public with respect to Brown Act, do's and don'ts, can do, can't do?
Yeah, Bill can chime in.
As a member of the public, I'm saying, not as a council member.
Right, Bill can chime in more specifically, but there's generally an exemption under the Brown Act for listening and for academics. And so certainly if 3 council members are sitting in the back room deciding how they were going to orchestrate policy, that would be a problem. But 3 members of the council going and listening and asking questions and becoming informed, that is exempt from the Brown Act. You want to get specific?
That's correct. Yeah, government participation, that's allowed. Absolutely.
And if I'm recalling correctly, ad hoc committees generally are not public meetings. Is that correct? Or not?
Yes.
Okay.
Correct. So on that note, that's all of the slides that we have for the council this evening. We covered a whole range of topics, and any of us are happy to answer any questions or comments or anything else that the council may want to talk about on this topic.
Very good presentation. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Good to get the oversight of the breadth of work that we have to cover. And what goes along with that, the breadth of work that city staff have to cover, fire district as well, just to be able to keep us on top of things.
Well,
Can I ask real quick, were there any committees that Ken was on that anybody actually wants to take away from what's available? Or because I was looking at simplicity and maybe trying to just take on the ones that Ken actually had, unless there's somebody that really wants to take one of them away.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a discussion for Tuesday. I think there's gonna be some shifts and some horse trading going on that evening. So
okay, that's fine.
Yeah.
But it might be worthwhile to say, here's what Ken was assigned to, regardless of, not necessarily saying, well, Pierre's supposed to replace Ken, but just to say what Ken isn't on anymore, so we know what the vacancies are.
Certainly identified on that list of committees. So, but again, I think horse trading, that would be, okay, that's who's going to represent the American Canyon on that. But if any of us have an interest in any one of those, for example, the tourism piece, for example, we can sit in on that as a member of the public. We just can't participate in the voting process. More than one of us, we can't sit there and say this is our plan for this. No, we can individually be informed and educated about what they do. We can make decisions that way when issues come forward from those committees to us as a council of a whole.
I think Sherry has the assignment list. I'm going to go from memory, but she's going to fill in the blanks. Former council member Larry, I know, was a part of the Napa Valley Unified 2x2. I know he was the city appointee to LAFCO. I know he was the city appointee to the Watershed WIC is the acronym. I forget the exact, all of the words of the Watershed Information Conservancy. I'm not going to get both C's. To the WIC. And there are probably some others. Cherry, I don't know.
Listen, do you mind if I share my screen?
Yeah, that would be great.
Try it again.
There we go.
Can you see the?
Yeah, it's a little tough, but I can kind of go from my memory here.
If you can make it bigger on the bottom, you could see it on your right-hand side.
That works.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I think also to note, many of these committees have alternative appointments. So in some cases, we have the appointee and then an alternate. And I'm just going to go with the appointees, not the alternate. So if you wouldn't mind kind of scrolling down, Cherry, there were a number of alternative appointments, but
are we just looking for Ken Leary's?
yeah, correct.
So there's
Ken is here.
I know two. I know two off the top of my head. You can knock those out. Which one is LAFCO, and the other one is the NVUSD 2x2 committee.
Correct.
Yeah.
Ken also had been appointed by my predecessor to serve on the local TBID, the local governing committee TBID. That was, I'll call it a little bit of a unique relationship. The local governing committee is only supposed to have one council member, and that's having the city manager appoint another council member to it is a little bit of a unique relationship. So he did serve on that, and I didn't seek to change that, but also not necessarily how the governing committee was supposed to be set up with multiple council members. So if you wouldn't mind scrolling down more, Cherry. Mentioned the African American Caucus. We mentioned the yeah, he was part of the Climate Action Committee as well. I'd forgotten about that one. And that's something we ought to think about, because really many of the jurisdictions have two full appointees, although we've characterized it as a primary and an alternate. But in reality, we would really function them as two primaries. So that's something I think is worth thinking about. There's LAFCO, Watershed Information Center and Conservancy. I knew I was going to get both C's. That's the WIC, as it's known. He was the alternative for the Napa Valley Transportation Authority, as well as the Napa County Youth Opportunity Commission. He was also the alternative for the Napa Valley Tourism Corporation, and he was, along with Vice Mayor Oro, on the Napa Valley Unified 2x2.
That's it.
And I think that's it. So Cherry mentioned earlier that we'll be sending out this list as part of the council packet. And she may actually send it out ahead of time, but this will be part of the council packet for next Tuesday. And what will come out as the packet is the current assignments, and then the council activity next Tuesday will be to change, if change is wanted, will be to change any and all of those. So what you'll see in the packet is that that spreadsheet. Well, I don't know that we have anything else for the council. I hope this was helpful, and
Yes.
and I hope it kind of sets the groundwork for next week, and then for the next month and 60 days. So
I appreciate the fact you put it together with the Citizens Academy. It's helpful if the local residents realize how complicated, how many layers there are to just the day-to-day operations of the city, let alone dealing with the bigger items that are very perplexing. Yeah, appreciate everybody putting this together this evening. Thank you all who have participated. This has been very informative. Thank you.
okay.
Are we done for the evening then?
Adjourned
Okay.
at 6:52.
All right. Thank you. We'll adjourn then.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you. Take care.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Good night.